Hi there! Last time I was out with the kayak I had some problems with balancing the hydrodynamic pressure from my wing-formed pontoons. At the low wind speed the hydrodynamic pressure is too little and the kayak is falling off from the wind. And at higher wind speeds the hydrodynamic pressure is too much. So then it pushes the kayak upwinds instead. So my plan is to extend the ring profile all the way down to the keel and not just this upper part. And that will give me better hydrodynamic pressure at low wind speeds. And for higher wind speed I'm thinking about reducing the width of the pontoon. When the wind speed is high and the pontoon is pushed down into the water and this part also gets submerged, it gives too much hydrodynamic pressure. But with a reduced width of the profile, the pressure will be reduced. So that's the plan, and that's why I'm starting a new build today. I'm gonna do 2 new pontoons with hopefully better performance both at low and high wind speeds. I will use a foam core for this build as well. First step is to transfer the profile from the paper to the foam. I draw a center line with the same length as the old profile. I mark stations on the line to divide the length into 10 smaller distances. From the paper I transfer the measure in scale to the foam and use a bending piece of wood to draw a smooth curve between the stations. It's possible to follow the curve with a saw. A hot gun would be another possibility, but that would result in more dangerous gases. The gases released during sawing are smaller and my only problem is particles. I will need 4 layers of foam for each pontoon, making up 40 cm in height. I try to waste as little material as possible. Next step is to glue the foam layers together. There are some mismatches in the cutting, but I will leave that for later. Still, I try to fit them reasonably well and make some adjustments. When I have glued a few pieces together, I can check the alignment. I find some high spots and act on them. With this mesh tool it's easy to control the removed amount. I continue to check the rest of the surface and find low spots. I make some pieces of foam and after mixing with thickened epoxy I use it to fill deep voids. I also use lightweight epoxy filler to fill some not so deep low spots. Epoxy mixed with micro balloons are heavier but are easier to work with. After curing I can turn to the other side. Add some more material that I glue on with epoxy and continue with adding material. It's possible to remove stuck clamps with some moves and do some more adjustments. The third step is sanding. I try to get a locally smooth surface and check the evenness over the whole distance. A high spot gets a massage. The surface improves. I also prepare for beam holders. It's only the surface that is hard. The core can be removed with ease. With a rasp I smoothen this surface. The inside of the beam holder will need strengthening. I prepare glassed over wood strips for this. It's easy to glass them over now instead of when they are in place. Epoxy is expensive, so I make sure to use all of it. The edge will need to be improved. I will use cut glass for the strengthening. as soon as I have mixed it with epoxy. I'm not sure this is the best material for this work, but it provides a good support for other material. The smaller unevenness is also taken care of. A second sanding to iterate towards a smooth and even surface. Better. But still not good. I will round the corners around the keel. On both sides. This surface is very soft, so it's easy to sand too much. A dab of epoxy will harden the surface and make it easier to handle. More correction of the edges. Followed by sanding. Moving indoors again. I make a hole for a bolt. The bolt will hold the beam. It must be in line with the beam. I prepare a hole for the bolt. The dry fit seems to be fine. The bolt will rest on a big dab of epoxy. And the wood will add the required strength. The sides are easier to add when the pontoons are laying down. The edges need to be trimmed in preparation for the next step. Glass is rolled out and cut to fit the pontoons. I use thickened epoxy here to bond the glass. It will better bond to a still somewhat uneven surface. As this surface will be painted, it doesn't matter if it's a bit opaque. A roller also works better on an uneven surface than a pencil do. After curing, I can trim the edges. As I add a second layer within 24 hours, I do not need to sand in between. And turn to the next side. A similar procedure here. You often need to do some small adjustment. To smoothen the surface even more, I use a rubber putty. Trimming the edges, also with a sander. The keel will also need glass. And trimming of edges. On the front I will need holders for lines. And these need more than foam to hold on to. At the same time I will glass over this side as well. I add some cut glass into the thickened epoxy. After curing I can trim the edges. This will work. I just need to fasten the line holders. Replace the old boom. That malfunctioned last time. Next time I will test the new pontoons before I finish them. I hope you will join me then. Thank you for watching.